Welcome to Psych 224, Psychopathology and Deviant Behavior. Study Session 1, Contemporary Conception of Psychopathology and Deviant Behavior. Introduction. In this study session, you will examine the concepts of psychopathology and deviant behavior. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Define psychopathology. 2. Highlight the rationale for studying abnormal behavior. 3. Point out the behavior which is normal or abnormal. 4. Differentiate between psychopathology and deviant behavior, as well as their meeting points. What is psychopathology? Psychopathology is the scientific study of abnormality, and it is about understanding the nature, causes, and best treatment approaches to the various psychological disorders. In psychopathology, interest is in either resolving the mental health problem or at least moderating the symptoms of these disorders for a number of reasons. 1. They interfere with people living normal, happy, and productive lives. 2. They are often associated with a much higher incidence of other risky health behaviors such as smoking. 3. They place a huge strain on our economy in terms of work time lost, hospitalization, and treatment costs. Rationale for interest in abnormal behavior. We need to be interested in studying abnormal behavior because mental illness are by far the most common of all conditions that affect our well-being. Psychopathology is part of our everyday life. No matter what your eventual chosen career is, you will probably have to interact or deal with someone, even just in your everyday life, who is suffering from a psychological disorder. The more you know about psychological disorders, the better you will be able to identify, understand, assist, and perhaps even treat these individuals. Deciding what behavior is normal or abnormal. As with personality traits or dimensions, most indexes of psychological function can be thought of as continuums. The question of normality is deciding whether to place the limiting point on that continuum. These limiting points are, at least to some extent, culturally and socially determined. As such, they are changeable and reflect the current values of our society. For example, what is seen as a multiple personality disorder in some cultures may pass as a special talent for communicating with spirits or deities in some others. In the Western culture, someone who often has conversations with non-existent beings might be regarded as strange and perhaps in need of treatment. In other cultures, they might be regarded as a shaman or babalawo and given a special and honored place in the community. What is accepted as a normal range of sexual orientations and behavior in one culture or time may be classed as deviant in another. According to this contemporary view, the causes of abnormal behavior are many. There is a broad mixture of theoretical approaches to abnormal psychology, and each emphasizes a different approach to understanding and treating different disorders. Generally, the causes of abnormal behavior can be broadly divided into the biological and environmental factors and the combination of these. Any behavior that causes problems will be regarded as abnormal in the extent of this discourse. One term which is used extensively in the field of psychopathology is maladaptive. Abnormal behaviors are often referred to as maladaptive behaviors. Most behaviors studied by abnormal psychology are failures to adapt to an environment. Adaptation involves a balance between what people want to do on one hand and what the environment, including society at large, permits them to do on the other hand. So, adaptation depends on two things. First, the personal characteristics of the individual, and second, the nature of the environment that confronts us. The term adaptation is often used in evolutionary contexts to describe the survival of an individual in a physical environment. When we say that an animal is adapted to its environment, we mean that it has those characteristics which enable it to function effectively in that environment. It is able to deal with the demands which the environment places upon it, and therefore to survive in a physical sense. It has the capacity to seek and digest food, and to find a mate and successfully procreate. The terms adaptation and maladaptation are also used within psychopathology to refer to people's capacity or incapacity to modify their behavior in response to a changing environment. In this context, however, the emphasis is not so much on a person's physical survival, although physical survival is also often compromised when there is psychopathology, but more so on a person's psychological survival. We can define maladaptive behavior then as behavior that deals inadequately with some situations. This might particularly be the case where the situation is a stressful one. Diagnosing maladaptation. When psychologists and other mental health professionals make decisions about whether someone has a mental disorder or not, they will make reference to a diagnostic classification system like the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders (DSM) by American Psychiatric Association and International Classification of Diseases by World Health Organization (WHO). This maladaptation criterion can be found in virtually all the criteria for the different disorders in the DSM. If there is no maladaptation, then there is not really a problem. Normality is even more difficult to define than abnormality. However, certain traits that a normal person possesses to a greater degree than individuals diagnosed as abnormal include the following. 1. Appropriate perception of reality. Normal individuals are usually fairly realistic in appraising their reactions and capabilities and in interpreting what is going on in the world around them. 2. Ability to exercise voluntary control over behavior. Normal individuals feel fairly confident about their ability to control their behavior. 3. Self-esteem and acceptance. Well-adjusted people have some appreciation of their own worth and feel accepted by those around them. 4. Ability to form affectionate relationships. Normal individuals are able to form close and satisfying relationships with others. They are sensitive to the feelings of others to gratify their own needs. 5. Productivity. Well-adjusted people are able to channel their abilities into productive activities. Deviant behavior. Deviancy could be defined as manifestation of behavior which falls outside of some normal range. This normal range could be defined either socially by reference to what is seen to be acceptable behavior by people around the individual, or statistically by reference to statistics on how most people behave. In other words, deviance can be regarded as behavior that is non-conforming with respect to accepted norms and strongly disapproved. Deviant behavior can be criminal or non-criminal. Giddens 1993 defined deviance as non-conformity to a given norm or set of norms which are accepted by a significant number of people in a community or society. This perspective is close to the sociological theory which viewed deviance as not independent in existence but is socially constructed through possession of interaction. This approach represented a commitment to a thoroughly sociological understanding of deviance and marked a break with the absolutism characterizing common sense understandings. This assumption, then, is that no deviance can exist unless it has been labeled as such. Deviant behavior is behavior that is a recognized violation of social norms. Formal and informal social controls attempt to prevent or minimize deviance. One such control is through the medicalization of deviance. It is not the act itself, but the reactions to the act that make something deviant. Crime, the violation of formally enacted law, is formal deviance, while informal social violations, such as picking one's nose, is an example of informal deviance. It also means not doing what the majority does, or alternatively, doing what the majority does not. For instance, behaviors caused by cultural differences can be seen as deviance. Differences between psychopathology and deviance. It is important to differentiate psychopathology, or what could be referred to as maladaptive behavior, from behavior which is simply deviant. A maladaptive behavior is usually seen as creating a problem of some sort, as defined by the individual, the people around them, or by society at large. Whereas a deviant behavior is simply a behavior which is unusual by some standard or another. Deviance from the norm does not, of itself, produce maladaptation. We can define deviant behavior as behavior which falls outside of some normal range. It does not necessarily mean criminal behavior. Criminal behavior is defined by the law, whereas deviant behavior is regarded as deviant because it is not conformable to the societal norm. Hence, a criminal behavior will be both deviant and criminal, while the deviant behavior may not be criminal so long as it is not defined by the law. You will later find out, as you continue your training in psychology, that the distinction between maladaptive behavior and deviant behavior is reflected in all of DSM diagnostic criteria mentioned earlier. For example, see the diagnostic criteria for transvestic fetishism below. Diagnostic criteria for transvestic fetishism. A. Over a period of at least 6 months in a heterosexual male, recurrent, intense, sexually arousing fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors involving cross-dressing. Criterion A above describes the deviant behavior in terms of what it is that makes the behavior unusual by some standard or another. Of course, deviancy itself is not enough. To come to the attention of a psychologist, the behavior must also result in maladaptation. This is reflected in criterion B below. B. The fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. Study session summary. In this study session, you explored contemporary conception of psychopathology and deviant behavior. In the process, we defined psychopathology and deviant behavior and also made between the two terms distinction. End of study section 1. Thanks for listening.